conversions between percent, decimal, and fraction, I guess, slash mixed number representation. In this video, I will go over numerous examples on how to convert back and forth between these different representations. Now, before I do so, I want to show you between these kind of three representations, how to think about the conversions. And you may or may not remember that it is all about either multiplying or dividing by 100%. So if you have, let's say we have a bubble here, and this bubble represents our percent representation. So for example, 5%. And now on the other hand, what we have is we have two different bubbles. So we have a bubble that is, let's say, the decimal representation. And we have a bubble that is the fraction slash mixed number representation. Now, if you are going back and forth between, so for instance, if we do come back to this 5%, and you would want to convert this to a decimal representation, then you have to divide by 100%. Now, dividing by 100% is simply moving the decimal two places over. So if we have this 5%, and if you're dividing it by 100%, so that is like taking the decimal from the back and then shifting it over. So this would equal 0.05. Now, if you wanted to convert the percent to a fraction, then we do exactly the same thing, except of course we want a fraction representation. So we would have 5%, and I'll write it as fraction now, so divided by 100. And that gives us, so the percent signal symbol is gone, and that gives us 5 over 100, which of course we can reduce. So 5 goes into 100 20 times, and that would be our equivalent representation between 5% and then a fraction. So in both cases, what I had done is I had divided by 100%. Now, if you want to go back in reverse, so you can imagine that if we were going in now back to a percent, so for instance, if I had 0.05, well, now I would have to multiply by 100%. And of course, multiplying by 100%, so shifts the decimal back, and we get our 5%. The same thing happens with the fraction. So we're going to be multiplying now by 100%. And in that case, if you take 1 over 20 and you multiply by 100, so 100 is the same thing as 100 over 1. And as you know, so it's 1 times 100, that's 100. 20 times 1 is 20, and of course that is equal to 5%. So going back and forth between these is just a matter of trying to remember when do we divide and when do we multiply between them. Now, if you wanted to go between the bubbles of decimals to fraction and vice versa, so if you're going in these two directions, there is no division or multiplication by 100% because we're not changing it to a percent or from a percent. So be careful as you're going back and forth in between them. Now, the easiest way to go, for example, from a decimal to a fraction, so if I take that 0.05, if I want to convert this back to a fraction, then if you are familiar with naming decimals, the name of this is actually 5/100ths. And for that, 5/100ths, okay, is just that. And the way that you can think of it is that you have whatever is behind here, the decimal. So you would take it, so that's 0.5, which you can just write as 5. And then it had 2 decimal places. And those decimal places are basically the zeros that you have in the denominator. And that is the 5/100ths. Now, of course, you can reduce this and you will get your 1/20. So going from decimals to fractions, naming plays a nice role. Now, if you want to go in reverse, unfortunately, this is long division. So for instance, if I had 1/20, then I actually have to do the long division. So this is how many times does 20 go into 1? Now, of course, it doesn't go at all. So we have to extend this long division. And 20 into 10, again, does not go in at all. So we have to put in another 0. So now we have 20 into 100, and that goes in 5 times. And that is your long division that you have to know how to do in order to convert fraction back into its decimal equivalent. So the main idea is if you're going between percents and decimals and fractions, then you have to know when to divide by 100% and when to multiply by 100%. When you're going between decimals and fractions or mixed numbers, this case you can utilize the naming, and unfortunately you will have to do long division to go back and forth from a fraction to a decimal. Let's take a look at some more examples of this in action. So here I have numerous examples, and let's try to see what we can do. So first off, the first example that we have, which is this one. So I'm going to here just paste it on the right hand side. So I want to convert, really what I have is a fraction back into a percent. So if you remember, from a fraction to a percent, I have to multiply by 100%. So what I will do is I'll take 3/5 and multiply it by 100%. That's the same thing as 100/1. And now in the multiplication, before you start multiplying the 3 times 100, I do notice that I have the 5, and 5 goes into 100 20 times. So I'm basically reducing. That's the power of knowing how to reduce fractions. So now I have 3 times 20, which is 60, and then 1 times 1 is just 1. So it's 60/1, or just 60%. That's the first example that we have. Let's take a look at the second example. So in the second example, now I have a decimal that I want to convert to a percent. And again, from a decimal to a percent, I have to multiply by 100%. So multiplication of a decimal is simply shifting the decimal over. So this one is much easier to do, and that will be 12.5%. That's example number 2. Now let us take a look at example number 3. example number 3, now I have this mixed number, but it is a percent. So really, I have a percent that I want to change back into a decimal. So that is telling me that I will have to divide by 100%. So my question is 3/1/5% divided by 100%. So because of the division, the percents are canceling off. So this is what I have. Now I do want to change it back into a decimal. So what I like to do is I will take, so first, notice this is a mixed number. I can change the mixed number back into a decimal. And if you go back here, notice a mixed number, okay? So changed to a decimal, we have to do long division. Well, I know that I have, this is 3. Well, the long division for 1/5. Okay, so that is how many times does 5 go into 1? So it doesn't go at all. So I will put in 0, but 5 goes into 10 2 times. So what this is 3 and 0.2, which is just 3.2. Now I cannot forget that I want to divide by 100. But remember, what is division by 100? It is simply shifting the decimal spot over. So my answer would be 0.032. That would be its equivalent of the decimal. Let's take a look at now question number 4. So for that question, we have, again, a tricky one. So I have to convert this from a percent to a fraction, which means I'm going to have to divide by 100. And in order to divide by 100, so notice I have a mixed number, and I want to keep it as a fraction. So I have 8, so 3/4, divided by 100. Okay, so because I am converting to a fraction, I will first want to change this back into an improper fraction. So 4 times 8 is 32 plus the 3. So this will be 35/4. Now remember, division is really multiplication by the reciprocal. And if you don't remember, you can go to the multiplication and division video that I posted, and it talks about reciprocals and division of fractions. Now that I have this, I will actually try to reduce, because I have a 35 and 100, and I can use the prime number 5. So this is divisible by 5, and so is this. So this will be divisible by 5, and now you'll get 7, and this will be 20. So now I have 7. 7 unfortunately doesn't go into 4 or 20, so that completes the question, which is 7 all over. Now 4 times 20, which is 80. And that is the equivalent of that percent as a fraction. Number 5. Let's take a look at this one. So for number 5, now we have this example. Now I want to change a percent to a decimal. So what do? I have to divide by 100. And division, well, of decimals actually is nice, because all it means is I'm going to just shift the decimal over. So this would be 0.008. and that's all I do. And again, remember, that was shifted 2 times. So that is question 5. Now, what about the next question, which is question 6? So for question 6, we have the following, but we want to change this to a fraction. So again, I have to divide this by 100. Okay? So now division by 100. Okay, so what I have is I will first work, because it's a decimal, okay, and it's a decimal percent. So notice a decimal percent. So I will first actually convert the decimal to a fraction, and then I will divide by 100. Well, so 0.95 as a fraction, so this is 95 hundredths. Okay, so notice, so 95 divided by hundredths. And now this is going to be divided by 100 because I want to change it to a fraction from a percent. Okay, so let's try it. So we have 95 all over 100. Division is multiplication by its reciprocal. Now I am going to reduce first before multiplying because I see 95 and 100, which I can reduce. So both are divisible by 5. Okay, so I can divide both by 5. Okay, so this one will be 20, and you can try this. This one will be 19. So what I have is I have 19 over 20 multiplied by 1 all over 100, which equals 19, and 20 times 100 is that. And that completes question 6. All right, so let's take a look at question 7. So question 7, I have this one. So I have 9 over 2%, but now I want to change it to a decimal. It is a percent, which means I will have to divide by 100. But currently, this question is a fraction. So let me first change the fraction to a decimal. And then we will divide by 100 by shifting the decimal 2 spots. All right. So, well, 9 over 2, if you look at 9 over 2, it is simply 4 and 1/2. So I have 4. Now 1/2 as a decimal is 0.5. Well, 4 plus 0.5 is 4.5. And now the division by 100 means I'm going to shift the decimal over 2 spots. So that gives me an answer of 0.045 as a decimal. And that completes question 7. Now let's take a look at question 8. So for question 8, I have that. And now it's actually a mixed number changed to a decimal. So there's no division or multiplication by 100. And so what I'll do is, so I have 7. So that's 7. Now 1 over 8. Remember, fraction to a decimal is long division. So 8, and I will have to divide it into 1. It does not go at all, so I have to extend this. 8 into 10 goes once. So 1 times 8, subtract. So 10 minus 8 is 2. So I have to carry forward another 0. 8 into 20, 2 times. 2 2 times 8 is 16, minus, that's 4, so I have to carry another 0, and that will actually complete it because 8 into 40 goes 5 times. So what I have is I have 7 and 0.125, which equals to 7.125. And that's the decimal equivalent. So that was number 8. Let's try the last one. The last one is 1 1/4, and we want to change it to a percent, which means I will have to multiply by 100. Okay, so let's take a look. So first off, 1 1/4 is 5/4. Now, if I multiply by 100, okay, so now notice I can reduce because there's a 4 and there is the 100. 4 goes into, obviously, itself, and it goes into 125 times. Okay, so let me change that because 4 into 4 goes once. And now I have 5 times 25, which is 125%. And that completes the last example. I believe that these examples are great examples. They're not easy, and they really force you to think how to go back and forth between different representations of percent, fraction, decimal, mixed number. All right, thank you for watching.